right, welcome. This is Jeff Heggie. I'm excited to be here today. I've got Marc Champagne with me today, and I'm gonna read a bit of a bio, but I'm gonna let him do more of a self-introduction. But I'm excited about this because he's doing what I love talking about. So Marc unpacks the mental fitness practices and relative questions shaping the lives of some of the most successful and brilliant thinkers in the world. He's the host of a top 50 podcast, Behind the Human, with over 200 interviews, and co-founded the journaling app Keo, which ended up reaching close to 90 million people around the world. He has studied mental fitness practices for over a decade and has consulted for top-rated and App Store featured digital journals. Despite his dedication to mental fitness, Champagne hit a mental rock bottom when he made the decision to walk away from Keo. That's at 90 million people that he had impacted there. He had to reassess his next steps and how to get there while also remaining true to his passions and dedication to helping others. And, we're going to get into all this, but I'm just excited to have you here, Marc. So tell me a little bit more about yourself, share a little bit with our audience.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I'm really excited to be on the show. And yeah, walking away from those 90 million, that definitely did not feel good. That sucked. But thankfully I had some practices to bank on to get through that moment. But yeah, a little bit about me. Really, it just, I spent about 10 years in the corporate environment, in sales, and then brand management for the most part. But during that time, early in the mornings, I started getting up and I started reading material and surrounding myself with content and knowledge around just positivity, I should say, and mindset. Because at that time, I remember I was hired straight out of university, and we're all going through the same training programs, like figuring you've got to do something different, or we're all essentially going to come out a robot, essentially the same in the same situation. And that's what led me to reading and whatnot. And it didn't take long to then start realizing, well, it seems like, reading people like Robin Sharma or Tony Robbins, or at the time I remember Success Magazine and Darren Hardy and all that stuff. And it just all kept coming back to the mind, and your self-talk. And specifically what I was interested in was, or were the questions that all of these people were reflecting on. Because it seemed like, there was a journey, a wall was put up, or something traumatic happened that blew up a business or blew up their lives or something. And then there was a question posed that they reflected on, and then everything changed. So I remember thinking I could write down these questions and I would reflect on them based on where I was at in my life and leverage them as best as possible. But I remember thinking, like, especially when podcasts started, launching into the world and covering the same material, like why weren't the hosts stopping on that question? Like, I wanted to know more about that question, because that was the unlock. Usually the person on the other side would just jump into the new story or the new business and talk about all the, the interesting things happening there. But I was always left kind of wanting more understanding around these questions. And that lasted for, almost a decade of doing, reflection and journaling specifically on questions like this, to eventually get to the point of frustration that there was no digital solution at that time that would guide people through questions to pause and reflect. Just kind of like what I was doing in the morning, but doing it through word processors. And then I'd copy these questions down wherever I'd read or hear them and paste them into another app. And it was just disconnected. So that's what launched the idea of Keo that you mentioned, which was one of the first guided journaling apps. And at the time you had meditation apps were really starting to take off, like Calm and Headspace. So, there was this appetite, or it felt like there was an appetite to be guided digitally in some capacity. But like I said, there was nothing in the journaling space yet that existed. And that's how the whole idea was birthed, and why I, took the step or the step to leave really a very comfortable and secure job in product management, and a job that I actually quite enjoyed. The team was awesome, but there was always this this feeling of that I would regret not trying this new idea, because it was something that really bothered me. It's one of those scratch your own itch, or scratch your own itch ideas, essentially.
Right. And I mean, I do want to talk a little bit about it, but I'm really excited to talk about the other stuff. But from a entrepreneur perspective, this is also an exciting thing to talk about. You know, you created this app, and I mean, we could have a whole conversation around that by itself, but it took off. I mean, it was obviously something that picked up. You had an impact of 90 million people. So what happened? Tell us a story about what happened, and tell us the story about making that decision to hit delete.
Yeah, absolutely. And I only share this because it's what actually led to everything I'm working on now.
Right.
Because had I not taken that step into that entrepreneurial world, I didn't come from a family of entrepreneurs. I wasn't really surrounded by it, so it was very foreign to me. But now I'm like 100% in that world, and can't imagine going back to that past life. And it was because of that app experience. Now, to get to this current point, it was a hell of a ride, in the sense of, like you said, reaching, nearly 90 million people. And then staring at that number, I'll never forget staring at that number. I had Apple, the dashboard for Apple, and where all the apps live, like the back end portal. And I'm looking at this massive number, and the next step is hit delete from App Store, and thinking, man, like, how could we have failed at such a colossal level? I mean, most apps don't even get 1,000 downloads, if that. I mean, you're lucky to get that. There's hundreds of thousands of apps now, right? And here we had reached 90 million. We had about just over 200,000 people that were, using the app, that had downloaded, and we had some strong weekly active numbers and all of that, and we couldn't make it work. And, the short story was just, we had a lot of hype. We had a lot of brand collaborations. We had a lot of great people that were in the app supplying questions and content. And we had a ton of Apple features around the world that was generating these impressions. But that didn't mean our business model made sense or was working. We had a traditional subscription model on content that, for at the time, made sense. There were other apps that had similar setups, but we needed more time to figure out the flow. People were coming in, but they were coming out just as fast, if not faster. So we weren't converting, and it wasn't becoming a situation where we could predict, okay, each month, we had this amount of revenue coming in that we can then expand to this and that. We were just bleeding money, and eventually got to the point where, that we were already pretty deep financially, and mentally we were exhausted, and we had a very clear roadmap forward. We had just finished really good user research for the first time, which probably should have been done a lot earlier. But we had that insight, but we also had the insight of not being naive to how much more money and time it would take to actually iterate the product to get to that level. And that was the big question mark. And the thing that, at least for me, and my co-founder eventually as well, we were probably slightly timed aligned on coming to the same conclusion, but I was out of gas on that. And I didn't want to go down what could have been another 12 months of complete uncertainty and more, financial and mental stress. So we hit delete from App Store, and it was the most terrifying, and I'd say the darkest years of my life, because, and I say years because it took a while, and I'm still coming out of that, frankly, to understand, like, where am I going next? Because my backup plan was always, if this doesn't work out, I'll go back to the same industry I came from. But having worked in mental fitness and being, really involved in the space, and meeting, awesome humans such as yourself that, that are involved in this space, like, I could feel this is where I belong and this is where I want to stay. But I just deleted the vehicle that would keep me in there. So now what? right? And essentially that now what has led me to writing a book about it, Personal Socrates, which is still very much fueled around questions and the mental fitness practices that can help people be mentally fit, right, in a modern narrative. And a lot of there's a lot of overlap to what we're trying to do with the app, bringing relatable stories and profiles and people to open people up to what's possible with these type of practices. It's not just yoga instructors or meditation coaches that have access to this stuff. It's really anyone. So that's where I find myself today, and I couldn't be happier because it feels so aligned. Feels so aligned to be working in this space.
That's awesome. And I love this because it does work into so much of what I work on, with my own clients. You talked about Success Magazine. I've got boxes of them in my garage that my wife keeps saying, when are these going to the garbage? They're not.
Yeah.
But Darren Hardy talks about bookending your days. And I always talk to my clients about that, how you can control your mornings, control your evenings. Everything else can fall apart, but take control of the morning and evening. And part of what I get them doing is some success habits in the morning. And one is what I call my mindset questions. And this ties in so much with what you're doing. So I'm excited to get into this. First of all, tell us what mental fitness is.
Well, there's definitely classic definitions or official definitions, but my definition is that mental fitness is the umbrella to anything related to the mind. Because and the term came up when I used to talk about the app, and I was trying to pitch the idea of the app, because people would default to mental health. And obviously, as we know, there's a lot of stigma around mental health, and that's a whole other topic. Whereas mental fitness, in my opinion, captures mental health, captures mental resiliency, captures performance, like all of those areas. And I think it's relatable in the sense that we all understand physical fitness, which is something that we decide that we want to do and upgrade our fitness. It's something that we're planning into our day. So I like the idea of talking about our mind work as mental fitness, because now it's just putting a different flavor, I think, to the whole idea or notion that you're taking charge of this. So mental fitness to me is really just showing up daily, weekly, whatever your frequency is, hopefully daily in some capacity, to upgrade and train your mind to be able to handle the things that will come up, like you said, in the middle of the day, right? Because we all know life is going to happen. Just like an Olympic athlete is they're doing mental fitness as well. But if you think of the physical training, they're doing the physical training for the event. They're not testing out new things during the event, but it's the daily physical training that's preparing them for that. And we're in the biggest event possible, life. So why not train daily so that we can handle that and make life just a hell of a lot more enjoyable.
Exactly. So this brings the app into it as well. Tell us about why journaling. What's the importance of journaling?
Well, so journaling, for me, it's the questions. To me, the practice is reflection. And journaling is one way to do that. In journaling, by definition, many would think pen to paper, or if you're using an app, but basically you're doing some sort of dialogue with yourself. But the dialogue, to me, or the most important part of it, is the reflection. And for me, to stimulate the reflection, it was always the question, because I think a really good question gives us the pause that we need to stop the autopilot, to stop the treadmill, to stop the looping narrative or the thoughts. If you think about it, if you're having a bad day, something's bothering you, one question like, what makes me smile, can completely stop that narrative right away, right? You're immediately thinking of something that lights you up and automatically have stopped that narrative. Because I think Tony Robbins says this all the time, you can't be grateful and upset at the same time. So for me, I started realizing how powerful these questions were. And then going back to the whole situation with the app, it was in that moment, in those dark days, where eventually I realized, well, wait a second, I've interviewed all these incredible humans, and they're asking a very different set of questions. They're asking progressive questions that'll pull you out of any situation. That led me to my question, which was, what do I want for my life? And it was in that moment that I really realized, even though I was working with questions day in and day out, that I came to this realization that at any point, any one of us are always one question away from a completely different life. And they're different questions for anyone. It depends on where we're at, but we all are one question away from completely changing, our path. If it's work related, the results or outcomes of, decisions and products and services and stuff like that. So I just feel like to answer your original question, I mean, for me, journaling is the container to really facilitate that practice of reflection, and combining that with really powerful questions has been probably the greatest gift I've ever received.
Right. And, I think a lot of people think, oh, journaling, I write down what I did today. Is the 12-year-old girl talking about the boy in her class and that. But
yeah.
when you look at using these questions to reflect and to, strategize for your life, I think there's a lot of power in this. And I love the idea of the questions. I remember, gosh, it was probably 25 years ago, I got a CD from Mark Victor Hansen, How to Think Big. And he used to say, the size of your questions determines the size of your results. And so I think this is huge. So I think even, I know you also talk about your self-talk and all of those things, which is really just a series of asking and answer questions with yourself. So how do we control that? Because how do we change that question that we're asking ourselves from why me to why not me?
Ooh, good question. Good question. I mean, I think it all boils down to finding something or landing on a topic or question or story that is relatable to our lives, like right now, right? If you can tap in and fuel your mind, and this is again coming back to those early morning practices of reading about other people and what they're going through and what they've used, then all of a sudden you start realizing, you know what, I'm not the first and only person and not the last person that will be going through something like this. So it's possible to get through this why me situation, right? Or if I think of like that internal negotiation, like you said, I mean, we're always asking questions. It's just if we can ask better ones, then we'll have better results. So like, for example, one of the profiles in the book was written on Kobe Bryant. And most people know him. He's this legendary basketball star that, has some of the most impressive stats out there. And he did some really incredible work for the game. And then eventually, before he died, was doing some really, awesome teaching and guidance and whatnot in just Mamba mentality and basketball philosophy and all that stuff. And I remember just doing the research, and Kobe was human just like the rest of us. I mean, he'd wake up, his alarm would go off, and he'd have that same self-talk that many of us can probably relate to when you wake up, you don't want to get up, and you make a million different excuses within like microseconds, right? In bed. I'll just sleep an extra 10 minutes. I'll do this. I'll shift this around. In my case, I remember when I was writing the book, I would say, because I would write in the morning, say, oh, I didn't, I went to bed a little bit too late. So I know sleep is super important. I need, maybe I'll get the extra 30 minutes and I'll write at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, and like all this stuff super fast. Right. And I negotiated myself out of getting out of bed right then. Sure enough, you get up, life happens, and 2 p.m. rolls by, and next thing you know, you're at that bookend of the day, and I didn't write a single thing. It's just when you allow yourself to just rely on willpower, Now you're dancing in dangerous territory, right? So again, like just leveraging these questions and these tools to acknowledge and be clear enough to realize that you're going through that looping pattern, and knowing that, hey, you know what, like Kobe Bryant, he's doing this stuff too, and there's millions of other people. We're all going through these same things, but we can all pause the narrative. We can all do something to then be able to get out of that. And in this case, in Kobe's, I mean, he just kept the goal of winning an NBA championship as his guiding beacon. As soon as that self-talk started, he would stop. Oh yeah, I'm getting up because of this. And then he'd get up. And you know, too, like we have all been there. Then you get up and within 5-10 minutes, you know, you're in good shape, right? I mean, you can do 4 push-ups on the ground as soon as you get up, or an air squat, and you're immediately up. Now all of a sudden,
Right.
all that self-talk, right, you know, isn't required, but you need to get up first, type thing.
You've got to have a purpose. You've got to have that why.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I think, you know, in just going through this whole journey with the app and everything, and then also writing the book, you know, the book is structured in 3 parts for a reason, and it started to become clear halfway through writing it. The first part has to be around clarity. Like we have to be clear, to your point, on our purpose and what we want, and also clear on what's happening, like the internal dialogue that's going on, or past relationships that may be coming up all the time and not serving us, and creating all this mental fog. Like being clear but what's going on and being able to see when those narratives are looping, you know, has to be step number 1. And I think questions, again, can really help uncover that. Then we can move into actually living and thinking more intentionally, and doing the things that will lead us to, like in my case, when I was asking the question, what do I want for my life? Well, now I need to start doing the things that will get me one step closer to that place, right? Or like James Clear, he's one of the profiles as well. His question is, who am I optimizing to become? And then, you know, you start becoming clear, are my habits and systems actually supporting the person that I want to be, or the life that I want? And then the third step just happens automatically. If you're doing the first 2, all of a sudden you start seeing things, opportunity surfaces, the right people start showing up in your lives. Not that they weren't there before, but you see the path, right? You see, I need to go there. So yeah, I just get super excited about this because it's endless. I mean, there's just so many great stories out there and great practices. And I mean, there's never a shortage of questions that if it shows up and you can see that and be like, wow, I need to sit down for 5 minutes and just do a little reflection there. And all of a sudden, bam, you're left with a list of new ideas or some sort of insight, right? It's fun.
Well, I think that's where there's so much power in this, is we can have so much going on around us and it's just life. We just let it blow by. And
Yeah.
it's when we start asking the right questions. It's when our reticular activating system comes into play and filters out these things, saying, that's important to me. Okay, now I've got to put some thought into it. And that's why I love your quote on, you know, we're one question away from a different life. But there's another quote that you said that I love. A great question forces us to think, and think hard. A great question leads to other questions and ultimately to the answers we're seeking. And I think that's one thing people don't realize is, you know, take some time to journal, because as you ask yourself these questions and reflect, it can change your life, literally change your life. It's not just saying,
Yeah.
how did my day go?
Oh yeah. I mean, it can change your life. I've seen it save a life. And this stuff has been around for thousands of years. I mean, the question after question essentially is the Socratic Method. It's around for thousands of years. I mean, all I did was realize that, okay, it seems like I'm doing that. I'm following this process of asking a big question and asking follow-up questions to get more and more clear. And it seems like, you know, anyone I've ever interviewed is doing something like that. Good old Socrates invented the method, you know, like I said, I think 469 BC. I just took a look at that and tried to simplify it and modernize it so that we're not thinking of the 6 question types that Socrates talks about, or scholars of Socrates have identified, because we're not going to remember that stuff, but just getting down to these simple principles of getting clear, intentional, and then seeing the opportunity, right? Like we can remember that, and then looping in the questions to help support that. But it's wild. I'll never forget, there was this one guy that I interviewed a few years back, and this changed everything for me. It like really put a sense of purpose in the work. And this was in the app days. But I remember showing up at his office, young guy, and his eyes were all bloodshot. He didn't look well. And remember, I was setting up my mic and I said, Ryan, are you sure you want to do this interview? Like we can reschedule. I feel like something's off. You don't look like you're well. And he paused and he said, no, he's like, we have to do this interview because it's the stuff that we're about to talk about, the tools and the questions, journaling and meditation, all these different mental fitness practices that gave me the 1 second I needed yesterday to check myself into the suicide ward of the hospital. And I have chills just recounting the story, but I remember thinking, wow, I mean, we're not just talking about, something that can level up your thinking. Like this stuff literally can save lives, because it gave him a second to make another decision and the way he described it was he felt confident that he had the toolbox or a set of tools to navigate, what was bothering him or what he had to deal with. And that gave him that opportunity to go in and seek help. So, that's an extreme example, obviously, but if it can do that, it can help, so many other people and people that, maybe aren't struggling to that degree, but also just bring more clarity and intentionality to their lives. Right.
Right. Now, as we get to the end, I'm going to have you share where people can get the book, and that all the links and everything will be in the show notes. But for someone that gets the book, goes through the book, I want to talk about some of the things that they can expect to get out of this book. So let's start with, your personalized mental fitness routine. Talk about that for a bit too.
Sure. Well, so first of all, the book is designed and written in a way that it's for someone that's either already has mental fitness practices lined up, or someone that's never done this in the first place. And the actual book or one profile each morning can be their mental fitness. So, for anyone that picks it up, all I would encourage is to read the introduction in one sitting. It won't take you very long, sets the groundwork and lays the land for what's to come. But then after that, really just open up the table of contents and, start with the first section and just allow your finger to go down the page and stop on a prompt or person that really resonates with you, because that, if you follow your intuition there, that's most likely the place that you need the most guidance, or you need a moment of stillness to think about and reflect on. And then now all of a sudden the content in that profile will be actually applicable. Right. And then you can bounce around. So I would highly recommend that, whether that's for this book or for any of these practices, like just set some time aside. I subscribe to what you're talking about in terms of the morning and evenings. For me, the mornings are the biggest. But what I've always done is I've dedicated time every single morning, and depending on what I need that day, I'll either do some journaling. I've been doing a lot of breath work lately the last couple of weeks. So that's taking more precedent over any of the other practices, or maybe there's some meditation in there. There's always some physical movement and then some learning, so just read, even if it's reading for 5 minutes, just to stimulate your mind and bring in some new knowledge. And then you apply the journaling to that knowledge so that it actually is being used in your life versus just reading to read. Right. I think Robin Sharma says this all the time, and it's always stuck. But we have like this fascination about reading, 100 books a year, or checking off a certain goal of number of books, which is fine if you're actually, consuming and applying everything that you're reading. But typically it's more of, we're going for the volume game versus, cut that goal out and just read to understand and apply. Right. Because then you're getting the most out of it. So that's why for me, like the ideal scenario is that someone reads one profile. I mean, they're 2 to 4 page profiles. They're not long. I'm doing the audiobook right now, so I know how long it takes to read. It's 8 minutes or 8 to 12 minutes of content in one profile. But the questions within the stories of that profile are where the magic lies, right? If you pause there, write in the margins or in your notebook or whatever, take a walk, and that's when the questions allow that knowledge or the information to actually translate into something that's applicable for you.
Right. And share again some of the profiles you have, because they're pretty awesome.
Oh, thanks, Jeff. I mean, so they're a mix of anyone that's still around today, like the James Clears of the world, or Ryan Holiday, for example, is another one. Samantha Gash. I mean, I've interviewed those people, but the ones that have passed, like Robin Williams or Kobe Bryant, Maya Angelou, Jane Austen, those are all people that I would have loved to interview, but I had to do the research, obviously, and get to the point of gathering enough information and insight into their lives and how they thought or worked to then inspire the prompts and then pull some of their practices. So, yeah, I mean, the idea again is that there are people in here that should resonate. There should be at least one person that would resonate with anyone listening. And it was set up intentionally to do that, to, again, just like the app was, to open up the opportunity to jump into this world, because then from there, there might be someone else, or there might be another practice like that might stimulate some sort of breath work practice for you, or get you interested into another prompt. So yeah, so the idea is that the book is loaded full of writers, artists, designers, strategists, there's entrepreneurs, there's athletes, there's coaches. I mean, there's all sorts of different people in industries that hopefully will land on the other side with the other person.
Awesome. Now, what would you suggest to someone? They haven't read the book yet. They're just listening to this. They're ordering the book as we speak, but they want to start this practice. What's the most powerful question they can ask themselves this morning?
Ooh. I would say it would be an intention setting question, which would just be even just a one word answer, but how do I want to feel today? And that, typically we don't suggest a word or intention that, we want to feel miserable or burned out or tired or something like that. We'll pick something that's motivating, or we want to feel energized, or we want to be excited, for example. And I say that just because it's the simplest question. It doesn't have to require a ton of thought, but that simple little action, if you do that every day, really can dictate your mood and how the day will play out. And just to get started, if you've never done any of this stuff, I mean, I still do that to this day while my coffee is brewing. And it just sets the tone for the day. And typically when you're feeling motivated like that, and you've done something, you've checked something off the list already before you've checked your phone or jumped into any of your work, then it starts to expand. And then I'd say, okay, well, then read one profile. It's going to take you 5 to 10 minutes, and at the very least, even if you don't write anything in the book, your mind is going to be set on a more positive track. Right. And you're going to jump into the day having learned something, or having these feelings of motivations and motivation and being driven and whatnot. And then that'll lead to more. Then all of a sudden, then you'll land on the practices and the rituals or the routines that are going to work for you. Right. Because you and I can say, yeah, get up at 5:30 every morning, meditate for 10 minutes, then do your journaling, read, exercise, finish off with some breath work, go to, which for sure, if people follow that, it's going to lead to good things, but it's probably only going to work for a couple days because it doesn't work with your routine yet.
Right. Exactly. Right? And that's like same thing with my mindset questions that I share with my clients. And I tell them, these are mine. You're welcome to use them, but customize them to you, because some of what is in there might not mean anything to you. It means something to me, but
yeah,
make them customized to you. And, going back to what you're saying about the profiles, yeah, I reread Kobe's profile right before we jumped on this call, and I had different thoughts and things going through my mind than the first time I read it. And so, yeah, I think it's a great thing to just to stimulate where your thoughts and questions are going to go. So no, that's fantastic. So speaking of the morning rituals and routines, as you just said, it's got to be for the person. It's got to fit for them. But give us an example of what yours looks like.
Yeah. So mine, like I said, for me, I get up at 5:30, usually Monday to Friday, pretty much without fail, give or take 20 minutes when I'm, I still do the internal negotiation, even though it's definitely less than before, but I'm human too. So it happens, but for the most part, 5:30. And then I spend about an hour and a half total, including like going to the washroom, getting a glass of water, like all the in-between filler stuff. And back when we were commuting to a gym or something like that. But basically that time block is reserved for usually some mental fitness first, some sort of reading, journaling. Like I said, right now, the first thing I'm doing is a round of breath work, and I'm doing Wim Hof stuff, 3 rounds of breath work. I'm just following his YouTube channel video, and you immediately physically feel the benefits of that. And then I stack it. What I've learned over the years too is I've been practice stacking. So for Wim Hof, if anyone that's not familiar with his work, essentially you're doing around about 30 breaths in and out, and then you get to these longer breath holds. And the more you do it, the longer you can hold your breath, essentially. And there's all these benefits. I mean, I'm not going to get into that, but during the breath holds, now I loop in visualization, and I'm stacking on another practice. So, I mean, I'm visualizing the goals either for the day or the week or the bigger goals, again, like this is my first book, like just seeing, people enjoying it and actually getting something out of the book. I'm visualizing that stuff while I'm doing the breath hold. So I've got 2 practices stacked in. And then once all that finishes, typically I do some sort of physical activity, whether that's like a at home spin class, a walk, weights, something like that. Again, though, like what I've noticed, and this is probably maybe 5-6 years ago, I came to this realization. I took the pressure off of having to do X in the morning, and just came to this thought that I'm going to exercise for 30 minutes and I can do a whole bunch of different things. Maybe one day I'm going to go to the school wall and I'm going to, I'm just going to hit a tennis ball back and forth, with a tennis racket. And I've done that. That's my exercise for the day. But it takes the pressure off of, I have to run today, or I have to do this, I have to do that. Like, allows you to the flexibility to say, you know what, today I feel like a calm walk. Like that's what I need today. And then you just do it, right? But the key is to allocate the time. And I can tell you, I mean, there aren't a lot of mornings where there are some times when, like I said, maybe I'll cut the 10 minutes or 15 minutes off that total block of time. But I'd say 99% of the time that morning block is there, and it takes a lot to move it, because that hour and a half dictates the other 23, 24 hours of my day. Everything dictates how I sleep, dictates how I think in the day, mood, everything. So it like there has to be something pretty monumental to not allow that to happen. So that's essentially, basically my setup there. It's a combination of reflection, learning, and movement.
That's awesome. And with it hitting from all different aspects there, you're exactly right. If I skip a part of my morning routine, it throws my whole day off.
Yeah.
And
you're playing catch up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you do those right things and it sets you up mentally and physically for the day.
Yeah, so totally. Great. Totally.
So personal Socrates, tell us more about how we get that, where we find it, how we follow you, and all of those things.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, the easiest place is just to head over to behindthehuman.com. That's just my personal website. So everything for the book will be there where you can get it. I mean, you'll be able to get it on Amazon where you get everything else. You'll also, I mean, I'm really proud of the publisher on this one, Baron Fig. They really produce beautiful guided notebooks and journals and different stationery products. And we talked about James Clear a little bit. They're the ones behind his habit tracking journal, actually, or collaborated with him. So I only share that because you can buy it directly from Baron Fig. They're out of New York. If you're a US listener, so you get it pretty fast. And they're super supportive of independent bookstores and small bookshops and stuff like that. And just knowing the team personally, just a good group of people that put a lot of effort into. You'll see if you order a physical copy, it's different. It's a different level of quality, based on the fact that I've been journaling and doing these practices for the last decade. That small things, like I wanted the book to stay open and lay flat and not the pages flip around, and that the page quality is actually really nice, and small things like that make a really big difference when you're actually trying to use this as your practice. But Audible, you'll have the audiobook, as I mentioned, ebook, all available as well.
Excellent. And what about yourself on social media?
Yeah, I'm just Instagram, Behind the Human is the handle there. LinkedIn, you can probably just search my name, Marc Champagne, but everything is linked out into off of the main site, Behind the Human as well. And if you're someone managing or running a team as well, I mean, there's just corporate offerings over there as well, working with your teams to help people get mentally fit using some of these principles. So best bet is behindthehuman.com. It's most up-to-date place.
Excellent. Well, and I'll make sure to also have those in the show notes so that people can get that. But definitely from what I've seen, he's got amazing stuff. Personal Socrates, make sure you get on there right now. Don't put it off. If you've got to get these things, get on there now, get it ordered. It is an excellent book. Marc, thank you so much for being with us today. Appreciate everything you've shared, and best of luck.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate you showing up with energy and presence. It was a really fun conversation.
Right. Hey, I am obsessed with helping people create the life that they want to live by developing the personal success habits in their life that are going to help them achieve those goals. You've got to understand where you want to go, why you want to get there, and how you're going to get there before you're ever going to be able to do it. So let me help you do that. Join me in the High Achievers Mindset Secrets program, and we'll walk you through everything from the confidence you need to do those things, how to set those goals, how to really engineer it so you can achieve those goals, how to have the proper mindset so you can achieve those goals, and everything else you need to do so that you can reach that level of success that you desire. So join me in the High Achievers Mindset Secrets at mindset.jeffhagee.com. Hope to see you there soon.